Miss Ellie Walker was the kind of teacher every student adored. She was young, vibrant, and full of life. Her passion for literature was infectious, and her dedication to her students earned her respect among her colleagues. But beneath the flawless exterior, Ellie harbored secrets that would eventually lead to her tragic demise. Ellie had been working at Crestwood High School for 5 years, quickly becoming a favorite among both students and staff. Her dynamic teaching style and her willingness to go the extra mile made her the poster child for the ideal educator. She often stayed late, grading papers or preparing for upcoming classes, and it was during these quiet after-school hours that she caught the eye of Principal Jonathan Shaw. Jonathan Shaw was a man of power and influence. Tall, with a commanding presence and a sharp mind, he had been the principal of Crestwood for over a decade. His reputation was impeccable, at least on the surface. Behind closed doors, he was a different man. He was known for being strict, sometimes even harsh, but also charismatic and charming when he wanted to be. And with Ellie, he wanted to be charming. It started innocently enough, late-night conversations in his office about school policies and future plans for the students. But as time went on, those conversations turned personal. Shaw, who was married with 2 children, found himself increasingly drawn to Ellie's youth and vitality. He was fascinated by her enthusiasm and beauty, qualities his own life had long been devoid of. Ellie, despite her better judgment, was flattered by the attention from someone in such a powerful position. The affair began in secret. After school, when everyone had left, they would meet in Shaw's office, sharing moments of passion that were as dangerous as they were exhilarating. For Ellie, it felt like a whirlwind romance, an escape from her mundane life. But for Shaw, it was something else entirely, a conquest, a way to regain a sense of control he felt slipping away in his personal life. As the months passed, their relationship grew more intense. Shaw began to take risks, pulling Ellie into his office during school hours, kissing her in empty classrooms, whispering promises of a future together. He assured her that he would leave his wife, that they could be together openly once his divorce was finalized. Ellie, caught up in the fantasy, believed him, but secrets like theirs don't stay hidden for long. Whispers started circulating among the staff. The janitor reported seeing them together late at night. A few students caught on as well, noticing the way Shaw's eyes lingered on Ellie during school assemblies, or the way she blushed whenever he was near. It wasn't long before the rumors reached the ears of Shaw's wife, Linda. Linda Shaw was a formidable woman, known for her no-nonsense attitude and fierce loyalty to her family. When the rumors reached her, she confronted Jonathan. At first, he denied everything, claiming it was just malicious gossip. But Linda was not easily fooled. She began watching him closely, tracking his movements, and looking for any signs that would confirm her suspicions. Meanwhile, the affair continued, albeit more cautiously. Shaw became paranoid, fearing discovery, but his obsession with Ellie only grew. He began to pressure her to keep their relationship a secret, to lie if anyone asked, to avoid being seen together in public. The thrill that had once defined their relationship was now replaced with tension and fear. One fateful evening, everything changed. Ellie received an anonymous text message while she was at home. It contained photos of her and Shaw together, intimate moments captured without their knowledge. The message was simple but terrifying. "You're not as invisible as you think. End it or else." Panicked, Ellie called Shaw, but he dismissed her concerns, insisting it was just a prank. But the threat felt real to Ellie. She began to question their relationship, wondering if it was worth the risk. The love she thought they shared now felt like a trap she couldn't escape. Desperate and scared, Ellie decided to break things off. She told Shaw it was over, that she couldn't continue living in fear. Shaw was furious. He accused her of betraying him, of using him. His demeanor shifted from the charming man she once knew to someone dangerous and unpredictable. Ellie felt the walls closing in. She was terrified of losing her job, her reputation, her life as she knew it. But she didn't realize that things were about to get much worse. Ellie's decision to end the affair didn't sit well with Shaw. His obsession with her had grown too deep, his need to possess her too strong. When she told him it was over, something inside him snapped. He felt betrayed, humiliated, and more importantly, out of control, a feeling he despised. The days following the breakup were tense. Ellie tried to maintain her usual cheerful demeanor at school, but Shaw's constant presence made it impossible. He would show up unannounced in her classroom, lurking in the hallways, his eyes filled with anger and something darker, desperation. She avoided him as best as she could, but his persistence was overwhelming. One evening, as Ellie was leaving the school, she found Shaw waiting for her by her car. He looked disheveled, a stark contrast to his usual composed appearance. He pleaded with her to reconsider, promising that he would leave his wife, that they could be together without hiding. Ellie was firm. There was no future for them. Frustrated, Shaw grabbed her arm, his grip tight, his voice low and menacing. "You don't get to decide when this ends, Ellie. You're mine." Shaking with fear, she pulled away and drove off, tears streaming down her face. She realized then that she was not just dealing with a broken-hearted man. Shaw was dangerous. She needed to protect herself, but she had no idea how far he was willing to go. A week passed without incident, and Ellie began to hope that Shaw had finally accepted the breakup. But on a stormy night in mid-November, the true extent of his madness was revealed. Ellie had been working late, grading papers in her classroom. The school was nearly empty, the corridors silent except for the occasional rumble of thunder. She packed up her things and headed to her car, the wind howling around her as she crossed the parking lot. As she fumbled with her keys, a sudden chill ran down her spine. She turned and saw a shadowy figure emerging from behind a nearby tree. Before she could react, Shaw was upon her. He grabbed her, his hand clamping over her mouth to stifle her scream. His eyes were wild, his voice a harsh whisper in her ear. "Why did you have to push me, Ellie? Why couldn't you just be with me?" He dragged her to the back seat of her own car, forcing her inside. She struggled, her heart pounding, but his grip was like steel. He pinned her down, his breath hot and frantic against her skin. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded with him to let her go, but her cries fell on deaf ears. "I loved you, Ellie. I would have given you everything," he hissed, his face twisted with rage. "But you threw it all away. You made me do this." From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small vial. Ellie's eyes widened in horror as she realized what it was. A potent sedative. She kicked and thrashed, but he held her down, forcing the liquid into her mouth. She choked and sputtered, the bitter taste burning her throat. Within moments, her vision blurred and her limbs grew heavy. The last thing she saw was Shaw's face, twisted with a mixture of love and fury, before darkness claimed her. When Ellie awoke, she was lying on the cold, hard floor of the school's basement. Her wrists and ankles were bound, and a gag was tied tightly around her mouth. Panic surged through her as she struggled against the restraints, but they held firm. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of mildew and fear. Shaw was standing a few feet away, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. He looked almost serene, as if this were all part of some twisted plan he had meticulously crafted. "I'm sorry it had to be like this, Ellie," he said softly, crouching down beside her. "But you left me no choice. You belong to me, and I can't let you go. Not now, not ever." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch gentle, almost tender. Ellie recoiled, a muffled sob escaping her as she realized just how deranged he had become. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a knife, the blade gleaming in the faint light. Her eyes widened in terror, and she shook her head frantically, pleading with him through the gag. Shoo, it's okay," he murmured, his voice soothing. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just need to make sure you won't leave me again." With a sickening calmness, he pressed the blade against her arm and made a small, deliberate cut. Ellie whimpered in pain, her body trembling as blood trickled down her skin. Shaw watched, fascinated, as if he were an artist admiring his work. "You see, Ellie, this is what love is. It's about sacrifice. It's about pain. And now, we'll always be connected." He continued, each cut more deliberate than the last, his eyes never leaving hers. Ellie's mind reeled, a torrent of fear and despair. She had to get out, she had to escape, but the bonds held tight, and Shaw was relentless. As he carved his love into her skin, he whispered words of devotion, promises of a future they would never have. The hours dragged on, and Ellie felt her strength waning, the pain and fear consuming her. She knew she had to survive, to hold on, but she was slipping, the darkness pulling her under. Just when she thought she couldn't endure anymore, Shaw paused, his head tilted as if listening to something only he could hear. A faint sound echoed through the basement, the distant chime of a doorbell. His eyes widened, and for a moment, the madness in his gaze wavered. The doorbell's chime echoed through the empty school, momentarily breaking Shaw's trance. He glanced down at Ellie, then back toward the staircase that led to the main floor. Panic flashed across his face as he realized someone might discover them. He stood up abruptly, wiping the blood from his hands onto his pants. "Don't go anywhere, Ellie," he whispered with a deranged grin, as if she had any choice. Ellie's heart raced as she listened to his footsteps fade away. Her wrists and ankles were raw from struggling against the ropes. Every movement sent waves of pain through her battered body, but she couldn't stop. She knew this might be her only chance to escape. Upstairs, Shaw cautiously approached the front entrance, peering through a crack in the door. It was the janitor, Mr. Thompson, an elderly man who was known for his routine evening checks of the school premises. Shaw cursed under his breath. He couldn't let anyone interfere now, not when he was so close to having Ellie all to himself. Taking a deep breath, He forced a smile and opened the door. "Good evening, Mr. Thompson. Is there something I can help you with?" The janitor looked surprised to see the principal there so late. "Evening, Mr. Shaw. Just doing my rounds. I noticed the lights on and thought I'd check. Everything all right?" Shaw nodded, forcing calm into his voice. "Yes, everything's fine. I just had some work to finish up. You know how it is." Mr. Thompson hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly as he glanced past Shaw into the dimly lit hallway. "You sure? You look a bit tense." Before Shaw could respond, a faint, muffled noise came from downstairs. It was Ellie. Shaw's heart sank. He knew she was trying to call for help. Despite her weakened state, the janitor's expression changed to one of suspicion. "What was that?" "It's nothing," Shaw said too quickly. "Probably just a stray cat. I've seen a few around here lately." Mr. Thompson's gaze remained fixed on Shaw, and he took a step forward. "Mind if I take a look around, just to be sure?" Shaw's mind raced. He couldn't let the old man go downstairs, but his options were limited. Before he could decide, Mr. Thompson pushed past him, moving toward the staircase. Panic surged through Shaw, and he lunged forward, grabbing the janitor by the shoulder. "I said there's nothing down there." His voice cracked with desperation, his grip tightening painfully to MR. Thompson twisted out of Shaw's grasp, his eyes widening in shock. "What the hell's wrong with you, Jonathan?" The situation was spiraling out of control. Shaw felt the walls closing in, his carefully constructed plan unraveling. With a roar of rage and fear, he swung his fist, striking the janitor hard across the face. Mr. Thompson stumbled back, blood trickling from his nose, but his resolve remained firm. "What have you done?" the janitor gasped. Staggering but refusing to back down, Shaw didn't answer. His mind was consumed with a single, horrifying thought. He had to silence the janitor. He couldn't let anyone ruin what he and Ellie had. Grabbing a heavy trophy from a nearby shelf, he raised it high above his head and brought it down with all his strength. The sound of the impact was sickening. Mr. Thompson collapsed, his body crumpling lifelessly to the floor. Shaw stood over him, breathing heavily, his heart pounding. Blood pooled around the janitor's head, seeping into the cracks of the tiled floor. For a moment, Shaw just stared, unable to process what he had done. But then reality crashed down around him. He had killed a man. He was no longer just a principal caught in a scandalous affair. He was a murderer. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with terror. He had to get to Ellie. They had to leave, disappear before anyone else found out. He turned and ran back to the basement, his footsteps echoing like gunshots in the silent school. When he reached the basement, he was met with a sight that froze him in place. Ellie was gone. The ropes lay on the floor, frayed and bloody, a testament to her desperate struggle. Shaw's eyes darted around the room, panic setting in. "Ellie!" he shouted, his voice hoarse and frantic. "Ellie, where are you?" He heard a faint rustling from the far corner of the room. Turning, he saw her, a shadowy figure huddled near the old boiler, clutching a piece of broken glass she had found, her eyes wide with fear and defiance. "Stay away from me, Jonathan," she whispered, her voice trembling but determined. Shaw took a step forward, his hands outstretched. "Ellie, please, we can still be together. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. It was just a mistake." But Ellie's eyes flashed with a resolve he had never seen before. She stood up, holding the glass in front of her like a weapon. "No, Jonathan, it's over. You're sick, and I won't let you hurt me." For a moment, they stared at each other, the tension crackling between them. Then, in a sudden burst of courage, Ellie lunged forward, slashing the glass across Shaw's arm. He cried out, stumbling back, clutching his bleeding wound. Seizing the moment, Ellie darted past him, racing up the stairs. Shaw tried to follow, but the pain and shock slowed him down. He could hear her footsteps echoing through the empty school, her desperate breaths mingling with his own ragged gasps. By the time he reached the main floor, she was already outside, running toward the street where a few late-night joggers had stopped, drawn by her screams. Shaw stopped in the doorway, his eyes wild, his hands shaking. It was over. The police arrived within minutes. Shaw didn't resist as they handcuffed him, his mind numb, his body weak. He watched as they led Ellie away, wrapping her in a blanket, her face pale but alive. She glanced back at him one last time, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and pity. Jonathan Shaw was charged with the murder of Mr. Thompson and the attempted murder of Ellie Walker. The media frenzy that followed was relentless. The once respected principal, now infamous for his obsession and violence. Ellie, though scarred, survived, her strength and courage a testament to her will to live. As Shaw sat alone in his cell, the weight of his actions crashing down on him, he realized that he had lost everything: his career, his freedom, and the woman he had so desperately wanted. In the end, his love had turned into a twisted, destructive force, leading him down a path of no return.